as someone that knows how to fix pianos, that then I go into war zones or disaster zones and go fix these pianos because it's an outlet for people to live.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author, and speaker. I met my young guest today at a Christmas party this past Christmas at a friend's house. I was not expecting what was about to unfold. There in my friend's living room, in the backdrop of a beautifully decorated home ready for the holy days, I was quickly seized in the soul. Who was this pianist who was playing for us, so comfortable at the keys and not at all snooty about it? When he shared a little about his other passion, adventure traveling, I was further intrigued. Something powerful was driving this young man's soul, and I simply had to know more. Before we meet Brayden Dreblow, just a brief background. He started his illustrious music career playing the piano and violin at age 5, alongside his musical family of 13. Later, he studied piano performance at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. He won several concerto competitions and has performed as a featured soloist with multiple symphony orchestras, along with extensive solo piano tours in the United States. As noted on his website, he regularly performs all over the world in starkly divergent places, from embassies and parliaments to the coldest inhabited place on the earth, Siberia. Additionally, he's played ragtime piano at Disneyland, Barber of Seville in Seville, Spain, hurricane relief in concerts in Puerto Rico, piano bars in Killarney, Ireland, and even harpsichord at the home of George Washington. His curiosity about the world and passion for music and people has taken him to over 130 countries so far, and in his travels, he's also learned how to converse in German, Russian, Icelandic, and Thai. Brayden has said he finds great purpose in traveling to places where the pages of history are turning. He was in China when COVID-19 began, Afghanistan when the Taliban took over, and Sudan during the coup, as well as Turkey post-earthquake and countless other important points of history. Now let's hear what Brayden has to say about whether music is necessary for survival. Well, welcome, Brayden, to Matters of Soul Importance. I'm so happy you were able to drive here today from wherever you were. I know you're always somewhere.
Everywhere, all the time. Yeah, I just got back. This last week I was playing in Bismarck with the symphony, and before that I came out from West Africa, and I'm all over the world. But I'm really happy to be here with you.
That is really amazing. And I'm excited to hear more about how that all came to be. So I met you at a friend's house this past Christmas Christmas season, and I didn't know much about what I was getting myself into, but I showed up alone, which I don't always like showing up to parties alone. I like to have a friend along. I'm a little sister who likes to have her little shadow buddy,
course, yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And I haven't known Elizabeth that long, but we met this last summer on a pilgrimage. So anyway, you were the featured guest, I guess, and you were there at her piano, and it was lovely.
Yeah, it's I think a very small world, and I'm very happy, especially here in the Midwest, how the world can seem even smaller sometimes. So the way that we met, was at this Christmas party a while back, and it's amazing when you meet someone and just right away you become friends. And but for Liz, I've known Liz for probably maybe 3-4 years or something. And it's kind of a funny story of how that all came about, that I was traveling as per usual. I was doing some concerts, I think, in Iceland at the time. And I got a call from Liz out of the blue that essentially there was a death in the family. And then they wanted to, at the funeral, then perform a piece on the piano. And the piano was really badly out of tune. And so I get a call from Liz out of the blue that says, "Hey, we heard from you, can you please, come help fix our piano?" And I said something like, "Yes, I'm in Iceland right now." I said, "Yeah, I got Iceland or something." And, but knowing how important these things are, that I told Liz, "Don't worry about it." And I changed the flight that night, get home right in time. I get to Minneapolis and hop right on the road, get straight there, go fix the piano, and get there just in time before the service. And And that's sort of like where a wonderful friendship started to bloom. And so then Liz and I kept staying in contact. And the next year, she was having another family get together, a Christmas gathering. And she had asked if I would consider coming to the house and playing some Christmas music while they light some candles for Silent Night. And how could I turn this down? Of course I would. And so then it started this new tradition that I was part of the family. And every Christmas now, then we do this family Christmas kind of event. And so then that's how we met.
Yes.
Then.
Well, my memory is of you just kind of dressed casually, and I was like, okay, there's a piano player, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like in a concert hall right now.
Sometimes,
it's not just. So I'm sipping my apple cider and eating my treats, and I was blown away.
Thank you.
Not only with your playing, but just your spirit. You had such a lively. You were just having fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you were so good.
I think that don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really wonderful musicians in the world. But I think one of the difficult things about being raised as a performer is that the idea is that you're going to play the music most perfectly and get every single accent and every single note. And then you go out on front of the stage and you have to play absolutely perfectly. And you look out at the audience and it's just a sea of shadows and you don't see any people. And I like the reverse of that. I love playing concerts, the intimacy. Yeah, I love being close to people. I love seeing them smile. I love seeing their foot dancing around when they hear some good music. And I think it's important as a performer to connect to people. So you don't have to be all snotty. You don't have to wear I love tuxedos, but you don't have to wear a tuxedo for everything. You can relax things a bit and make people. Give them an opportunity to enjoy the music rather than just observe the music.
Yeah, I think you had a stocking cap on. It was December, and so that
I think
was
Liberace would do the same.
Yeah, sure. But then you brought us all in together, and some of us happened to be church musicians, or like I met my husband in choir, like I was sharing a little bit before we started, and so music is you weren't standoffish. You didn't take off right away, do your bow and leave. You wanted to draw us in. And that was a really beautiful part of it too. In fact, I was almost going to bring my 19-year-old son with me. And I wished I would have, because I think he would have really loved that too. But where did this come from, Brayden? I want to know the source of this. So where did you come from?
It's a really interesting question. Yeah. Because as well, how does someone become such an open person? How do you become such a
world traveler?
It's difficult, yeah. So a little bit about me, my background. So again, my name is Brayden. I'm from Thief River Falls, or as we say, Thief River Falls. We're the most Norwegian city in the United States. We have plenty of lutefisk if you want to come get some. We have too much, you can take some. But I come from this small town. Thief River is about 8,000 people. And I come from a big family, though. I'm the third oldest of 11 kids. And my parents decided early on that music was a really good thing for kids. I don't know how or why. Maybe they read it in a magazine or something. But so all of the kids, there's 11 kids, were all about a year and a half apart. And so then the first kid, they started lessons when they were 5 years old. And then the next kid, then 5 years old, it's time to start lessons. And then when I came along, the third kid, then same thing, piano. And then you also pick a string instrument. And I think my parents discovered that music is a really good thing for kids. It's a good way to get their mind engaged into something bigger. Because yes, music will teach a kid dedication. It'll teach them perseverance. It'll teach them how to become their own teacher. But I think music also teaches kids how to feel, how to realize there's bigger and more important things in the world. It teaches a 6-year-old kid how to express the feelings of what love is, or what anger is, or what joy is, or what childish joy is. There's all these different versions. So then I started playing piano at a very young age. And then when it came time for university, then I ended up studying piano performance. I'm a good old homeboy that I went to Concordia here in Fargo. And so I studied piano performance with Dr. Jay Hirschberger. And then the question becomes, when you get to a university level, okay, how do you take it to the next step? And a lot of time when you enter high school or when you enter university for music, the idea is that you're going to go on and get the doctorate and maybe you'll become a professor yourself, or I don't know, maybe you have to get a doctorate in order to play with symphonies. I don't know. There's no resume, there's no career, there's no job postings, for how to be a classical pianist. And so in my time at Concordia, I just started experimenting with everything. I started trying to play with musical theater, try accompanying choirs, try collaborative piano, try small groups, try large ensembles. And I found that where I live is in the world of solo performance, or I should say in performing, both solo and with symphonies, this kind of thing. And so the question is, okay, great. Now what do you do with that information? And so then about halfway through college, then I started to try and branch myself out into performing. So I would start creating these concerts all around the United States and just forcing myself to get out there and perform. And it is really scary. I don't know how to explain this, but for a lot of musicians, okay, so take a step into my shoes. If you want to be a good musician, you start when you're 5 years old and you practice 10 hours a day. And then you get to university and now you're practicing, 15 hours a day. You lock yourself in a room. And what's interesting with a lot of really good performers is that you can play really well, but at the same capacity for your entire life, you've been locked in a room with a big block of wood and that has strings on it, And so a lot of people, a lot of musicians, we might be really, really good performers. But when it comes to talking to someone, you kind of skipped out on a lot of those things in exchange for becoming a better musician. And so that's why I forced myself into getting out there and performing, and where you're forced to talk to people and smile and embrace some people. And so then just the only way to get through it is just doing more and more and just practice the act of performing, the art of performing. And
before we go too much further, I'm interrupting your train of thought, but I'm back as a mom thinking about your siblings. So your family had this idea to get them involved. What a great idea, of course. But were all of your 11 siblings, are you all equally? Yep.
All of them
talented?
Musical. Actually, it's a great question, and only a mom could ask that. I think all of the kids are very musically talented, but to different degrees. And maybe the sibling rivalry is what caused that. But like I said, in the family, everyone started piano and a string instrument when they're 5 years old. Okay, it's great that you have a good pianist. And then the next kid, now you want to be better than them, or it's a big competition. And so
you're number 3. You're kind of like, that's
I know,
not
right?
much.
Yeah. Yes, to some degree, it pushed me to be better, But I found that with all of the siblings that we ended up kind of branching into our own areas of music. And so the oldest kid ended up getting her master's in composition, so writing music.
Okay.
The next kid, he chose to go more into the line of bass, and he ended up playing in a rock band for a bit.
Okay.
And then there's me playing piano all around the world, mostly classical and solo and with symphonies and this kind of stuff. The next kid, a bassist in the All National Symphony. And so we all kind of split into our own.
Did you ever do a thing together in ensemble?
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you one of the biggest problems in the family. So yes, we have a lot of pianists, but there's not a lot of music written for 11 pianos. And so, but we also have a lot of string players. And so the oldest kid plays cello, the next kid plays bass, I play violin, and then the next 6 kids in a row all play bass. And so whenever we're home for Christmas, all of the kids get together, and it's this whole mixture of instruments that you got 3 kids on the piano and 2 kids singing and 1 on the violin and 1 on bass and 1 playing harmonica.
That's crazy. Yeah, we had the little Christmas concerts, or the little concerts we put on for our family. But I just had one sister. But sometimes the cousins would get together too, but never that many people.
It gets kind of too much.
You could have a whole symphony.
Yeah, really, you could. Yeah, we could also have our own baseball team and a basketball team.
Yes, basketball. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So I just wanted to step into that, and then just to kind of, I haven't mentioned yet what our question today is, and then we'll jump back off into where you were going off into the world. But is music necessary for survival? So just keep that question in mind as you're plowing in. I don't know how you had. I know that when I was younger, I was much braver than I am now. So I kind of get how you just plow into something and don't think much about it. But you must have had support from your family or people. I mean, there had to be some kind of support network to be that brave. I'm thinking.
I think so. I think I really credit my parents with pushing the kids to do what they think is best in their life. And I think that through raising the kids that's the time and that's the opportunity to really change things in their life, if you will. That when your kid gets to be 20 years old, that you can't keep changing them at that point. They're going to do what they want at that point. And so I respect that when I was growing up, that my parents did take the time to instill all those kinds of traits of being dedicated to things. And if you're doing music, you got to stick through it. You got to practice your 5 hours in the day, and you have to be your best teacher. You have to be able to tell yourself, "I can do better." You have to be able to tell yourself, "Good enough is the 2 worst words in the dictionary." And so yes, the idea then of chasing all these dreams of performing around the world. I've been to about 120 countries now and playing for royalty and embassies and everywhere. And I really respect that my parents encourage me to do what I think is best. And of course, they get scared sometimes. For example, I was in Afghanistan as everything was falling, and I got detained on accusation of being a spy. And so there's definitely the days that my parents,
yeah,
they think,
when they said the world is your oyster, you took it to heart.
I took it way too to heart. Yeah. But I think that I look back on it and I would never trade it for anything in the world. That the world is such a big and beautiful and mysterious and wonderful place that I can't imagine a life where I don't go out there and try to look under all the rocks and figure out what's going on. And so then music is nice. It's a nice conduit to kind of push some of that traveling a bit. That it gives me a reason, we could say, to go out there and go do some version of cultural exchange. I know that idea sounds scary just as a title, that he's going somewhere to do exchange, a cultural exchange or something. But I think it'd be the same thing that if we had a performing troupe from Mongolia that came here and they wanted to do throat singing for you, like I would be so interested to hear that. I mean, I might not like it, but let's just listen to it, And I think it's the same thing, for me, that go out to Kazakhstan and go play the music of Gershwin for them. Will they like it? I hope so, But it's nice to show the world to them, even from their home.
I have another question. So I have 3 sons and 2 daughters, but my sons are 19, 22, and 29. And you could fit, I don't know where you're at. So
yeah, I just turned 28. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So how long have you been traveling the world?
Traveling, the easy answer would be after college. So I graduated in 2019, which, wow, I feel so aged now. But no, I graduated just before things took, the whole flip upside down with COVID. I will also say that was a very interesting time for performers. You think about a symphony. What does a symphony do when everything is shut down? How does music continue to survive in this kind of time? Is it also, is music necessary for survival? Our question of the day, that's a wonderful context for that question. And so I graduated in 2019. And
you were how old?
Say again? In 22.
How old?
22.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess 20.
Yeah,
that's
like this, Yep, that's where my college almost graduate is 22. Yep.
And but here, graduate as a 22-year-old kid and bright-eyed and what is it, bushy-tailed. And the other day I said bushy-eyed or something. But
I always get my metaphors mixed up. Always.
Yeah, but you finish college and you're so excited to go out there and go take on the world, and then everything stops. In fact, I was in China when COVID started, and that was a really interesting time to see. This was in a time before it was even called COVID-19 or anything.
Tell us about. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, okay.
Why were you there, and what was going on?
I was there kind of by accident, but it was interesting as things had started to spread that no one knew what it was, but it was something scary. And looking back on things, we can make judgments now, but in that time, it was scary to a lot of people that everything was unknown. But the way that things were being handled in China, for example, at this time they were just calling it the norovirus. There's no testing for it. They didn't have a name for it. They didn't know what it looked like. And so if you just had a lot of those worst symptoms, that it was one of those things like if it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So you probably have this that we don't even know what it's called yet, but don't spread it. So go home. But the way that the Chinese government was kind of trying to control this unknown thing was that have you ever seen pictures of like Shanghai or Beijing where the skyscrapers are these tall, skinny things? They're really tall, skinny skyscrapers. And the way that they would handle things at the beginning is that, okay, if this so-and-so person, let's say James, he has this unknown thing, we don't know what it is, that we don't know who he spread it to. So his entire apartment, they locked down the entire apartment. So no one, all people now on 60 stories, they're not allowed to leave. And so then in these early days of what it was like in China is that every day I'd have to check the government health website and see if your building was one of the lucky ones. And every day the list was doubling and doubling and doubling. And people are getting more afraid. And now all the masks are sold out and everything. And so I was put on one of these last emergency flights back to the States. And I think I got back on a Tuesday, and then the world shut down on Thursday. And
it's like March 9th or something like
that.
March. Because I was
like
on my way to go visit my kid in Phoenix on March 12th. And the 11th, I think, is when President Trump said no international travel.
Yeah. And
so you snuck back in right before.
Yeah, so I got back just in time. And, it's funny. I was just thinking about the memories of this time that I remember when they had announced that, was it Friday, I think everything was closing, or Monday, that I think the first thing I did is I went over to Happy Harry's. And I was thinking that, I don't know how long, it's 2 weeks, I don't know. And, but get some Budweiser for this.
You didn't go try to see if there was toilet paper because it was disappearing already.
No, everything was gone. Yeah. Got to get the good things while they exist. And, but yeah, so what is interesting though is that here, it was a whole conflict. So everything is collapsing. That, here Brayden had thought that he'd finish college and he'd go right into a world of performing and, I'd go do all these tours. And okay, now that dream is kind of squashed for the foreseeable future. We don't know how long it's going to be. And then as well, someone that loves to travel so much. Here now I'm locked, in I love my home country, but, I'm not able to go anywhere. And that's the first time that I'd ever experienced that idea that it kind of, for example, there was a time during COVID that the U.S. passport was worse than the Syrian passport, where I think we were only allowed in 14 countries. And it was so weird to kind of feel the flip side of that it's not that we can't afford to, or we can't get the logistics or anything, but it's that we are not welcome. And that was a really kind of weird thing to comprehend. And the entire world was more or less shut down until August, I believe, of that year. And so that was the first time I was able to get back out, stuck at home for 5 months, just like all of us. I'm sure just like you that, started to grow the COVID hair, and
I was cooking a lot for my family. They all came home and I'm like, okay, we're going to do this again.
Exactly.
I thought you were going, but now you're coming back.
I started learning a lot of new hobbies. I think during COVID, I tried to start making my own beer, which was a fun one. I tried to start learning Arabic for fun, but I figure since they write in a right to left, it's the reverse of us, that I tried teaching myself Arabic letters and writing with my left hand, but just so there's time to do everything.
Yeah.
And, but
let me ask, how much had you been traveling before then, or was China the first?
No, before that, I'd probably been traveling for about a year and a half or so. I think at that point I'd only been to 35 or 40 countries.
That's still
but
a lot.
It was still a lot, and it was enough to open my eyes that that I knew that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be out there, not only seeing the world, but also out there performing, mixing these two things that I love. And
one more quick question about China because I want to hear about like how that's evolved after COVID. But what were you doing in China? Like, did you have a chance to do music in China before?
No, I wasn't doing any music there.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to remember back. I think it was a concert in Hong Kong or maybe Thailand or something.
You were just traveling.
There was a
then?
reason, I was out there.
Okay.
I don't remember why.
Okay.
Maybe it was just passing through. But then as well, it was one of those times that whatever plans you had, everything is changing right now.
Yeah.
But it took a while for things to start coming back to normal. And even playing concerts in the States, I remember playing some concerts with, actually, here's a really interesting short story, but playing with Bismarck Symphony during COVID. That Christmas, we had a concert planned of doing the Nutcracker. And so we were trying to take all these precautions that were obligatory, that everyone needs to be spaced out a certain amount, and so many people in the audience, and we're in a building, so everyone's supposed to be wearing masks, and but then playing with a symphony. So here we're coming into the concert, And in the symphony we have the strings, we have the brass, the flutes, the woodwinds. We have these 4 different groups. Half of them use air, right? And so then 1 week before the concert, I get a call from the conductor, and Brayden, emergency, emergency! Someone in the brass section was just testing positive. And so, do we cancel the entire concert now? It's like, oh, that's a great question. I've never experienced this. How does music exist during COVID? And so then the decision that we came to is that if the concert will go ahead, we have to remove all of the brass and the woodwinds. And now the whole ensemble is, lopsided. And so then now that's where the fun of being a professional musician comes in. That, hey, Brayden, I know you prepared all your music. The concert's in 4 days, but you need to throw all that out the window and now rewrite the music to throw all the brass parts into the piano, throw all the woodwind parts into the piano. And, but that's what life was like as the performer during COVID.
Wow. That's crazy. So, well, we made it out of there, thankfully.
Yeah,
Woo!
right.
And then then where did you go from there? What was the next, once you could dream again?
Yeah, exactly.
What was the next place?
The first country I went to was Serbia, of all places. Serbia, the good old Yugoslavia kind of area. And this was coming out of a time that the United States was slowly being allowed into more countries. But a lot of people will ask me, okay, Brayden, you've been to 120 countries. You've been traveling for 5 or 6 years. What was it like during COVID? Was it bad traveling? Was it fun traveling? Was it difficult? It was absolutely difficult. I think in just the time from August to the rest of the year, I think I counted 153 COVID tests or something, because you needed it almost every 3 days. And then for every plane, you needed it for everything. Every country would demand it when you entered. But Serbia was one of these, I think, 15 countries that was allowing us. And I loved the game of logistics. Maybe it's just the mind of a pianist that we love numbers and games, but it was a game of logistics that if Brayden wants to go to Turkey, that Turkey I'm not allowed to go directly from the United States to Turkey. But if I go stay in Serbia for 14 days, then I get classified as a resident of Serbia. And then now you can go to Turkey. And so it's this big game of wherever you want to go, these hoops and these obstacles and these routes that you kind of had to follow. And then as well, one additional thing on the idea of traveling during COVID, or like coming into the end of it, was the idea that even in the United States, the rules were different. Here we know in North Dakota and Minnesota that, if I can say very humbly and plainly, that, we're 2 friendly states, but we kind of live in different worlds, and this can be good and bad, and whatever anyone wants to say, but it's just a reality. Even when we live close to Canada, we have these different impressions of everything, and that's just the way things are. That's not a bad thing. Internationally traveling during COVID was the same thing. It was so easy to travel in the United States because things were kind of uniform, but here, like, coming from Dubai, they had a fine there that if you knowingly had COVID and step out of your house, it's a $15,000 fine. Wow. And then you hop on a plane and go to Tanzania, and as a government policy, they thought that it was all a hoax. And so it was amazing that you could hop on a plane and just completely different worlds of how they're approaching
that kind of
things.
made some of our brains go,
Exactly, right?
Even in a restaurant where it's like, okay, you have to wear a mask, but you can take it off to eat. And it's like, why? What?
Exactly, right?
Like, if you're a logical thinker, it was strange.
Exactly. Yeah, but regardless, I found it interesting at that time. I found it was most importantly interesting that if you were willing to go through all the hoops, that it was a time that everything was empty. I have so many memories of going to like the pyramids of Giza and being the only person there. The only person staring up at this huge pyramid, or Petra, or any of these brilliant, amazing places in the world. They were all empty. And so I reminisce about this time of COVID traveling. But regardless, then I'm of course happy that things are finally back to normal. And here I'm sorry we're directing this interview all about.
It's fascinating.
Time, but
it's really fascinating. It is a time where we have so many memories and maybe some post-traumatic stress syndrome going on, and so we're still processing it. I appreciate it.
I think it's going to be one of those things that looking ahead in the future, that just like how I can ask my grandmother, like, do you remember where you were when the news of the Kennedy assassination came about? And they remember so vividly. I remember exactly where I was.
Oh yeah, because I was traveling down to Phoenix, and when they told us, everything was canceled down in Phoenix. So all these people were going down there for sports things and everything. And we're all looking at each other like, what are we doing? We're about ready to get on this plane.
Yeah.
And people were, it was really strange.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I should stay home. But my kids were on a trip. Two of my youngest boys were on a field trip, or down there, not a field trip, but whatever. They were on a tour with their school. And then my other one had just moved down there. I'm like, half my family's going. I'm just going to go. But then I got there. I'm like, can I hug my child or what? We're
exactly. Yeah. And so it's going to be interesting, 20 years from now, 30 years from now.
Tons of stories.
Yeah. And how everyone got it at a different, everyone experienced it at a different time frame in their life.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, even in my family, as the third oldest of 11 kids, I look at all my younger siblings that, okay, what happens when you take a middle schooler out of school for 3 years? What happens when you take an elementary kid out of school for 3 years? What happens when you take a college kid out of school for 3 years?
We're still living the effects. I have a daughter that started her teaching career right at the end of that. So she started it during COVID, the end, when they were just kind of masks, kids sneezing into these things.
Yeah, right.
Like,
but here it's an interesting opportunity again for our question that is music necessary for survival?
So, what's the answer?
That's a great question. I kind of ask you as well. That it's like, I think back on that time that when everyone is locked in their house, that a lot of us, we found that we had time for new hobbies or new habits, or we tried cooking more. Or, for me, I loved learning new languages or learning new piano music, learn a new song every day, kind of thing. But as well, a lot of us are kind of sitting at home in silence and. Did music help us get through a lot of it? I'm sure for a lot of people that you discovered your new favorite artist. You discovered, or you started listening to, I Have Time Today. Let's listen to the entire album of Jim Croce, or let's listen to, the Bee Gees, front, back, left, and right, And somehow there's music that got us through something. I mean, even for me, I just said it without realizing that I was practicing piano and learning a new piano piece every day because it kind of takes me to a different world. And so was music necessary for us to get through it? I ask also the listener, I ask you guys to just take a moment and think during COVID, who was your favorite artist? For me, it was Jimmy Buffett. Sorry. But it's an interesting question.
I do want to get to faith too, because I don't know a lot about your faith, and so I'm going to put you on the spot here. But I feel like most creative people at least are aware of a soul. Like there's a muse within us. So that's another thing during COVID. Like for me, I was really tested that way. Like I had to really, really. Well, I realized how little trust I had. Like there was a part of me that's like, and I'm a mom, and I'm trying to launch my kids, and I'm like, now what? Like I kind of thought I had a plan here for them, or was helping them lay out a path, or at least give them a start on that. And everything was strange that way. And it was to clear my calendar was just so weird. I'm a planner. I like to kind of know what's happening. So I had to test in my faith. What about you? Like, where are you at in your faith journey? And how has music shaped that, I guess?
Yeah, they're two very interesting questions. I was thinking about this because we had both been talking about this over the last few days, and I was thinking, how do you accurately answer the question? And I would invite you guys to just take a moment and think from my shoes. Okay, so Brayden, this 28-year-old kid from Thief River, they're all Lutherans up there, they're all Norwegians, and but here he's spending his time on the other side of the planet in West Africa. Okay, where is the ELCA churches in Sierra Leone? They don't really exist out there. Where is it in Iran, or where is it in Cambodia? And so sometimes it feels kind of difficult to access your religion or to feel close to it. Like I think for a lot of people here in Minnesota, if you have that, if you're in a trying time and that you just want to go to the church and just sit there in silence and just think. It's kind of hard to do that when you're in Egypt or something.
What was your denomination?
Lutheran.
Oh, you were
Lutheran.
Okay.
Yep. And for many years, of course, I was, as a musician, you get sucked into playing for church all the time. It's a good thing. But so years and years of going to church religiously, every week and playing all the Lutheran hymns, and so all these songs are stuck in your head. But then it's interesting when you get put into a world where now you're as far away as possible from all of that. And so I found that over the last 5 or 6 years that maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, I don't know. But the idea that a lot of a lot of that spirituality kind of has to live inside of yourself, that it becomes a very personal thing. And that, and as well, sometimes there are the situations where still in the modern day world that you can't be as open about your religion. And so, for example, if you're in Afghanistan, it's probably not a good idea, to be walking around, in the northern Taliban areas and spouting off things from the Bible.
Do you have to cover your crucifix if you had it or whatever?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. How many people, I ask the viewer this as well, can you think of at least 3 people in Minnesota and North Dakota that have like a cross tattooed onto them? Or how many people, wear their cross earrings or something, and you have to be very thoughtful about this. You could also make the argument that they would feel the same thing in reverse. If someone from Pakistan then comes to the United States, that they might feel the same way, that they need to shelter themselves, and then they would say the same thing, that their religion becomes a very a personal thing. And so, to answer your question about what spirituality is to me, that I realize that it's a lot more than just reading along what we read in Psalms and Leviticus and what we see in Deuteronomy or Revelations or something. That I realize that religion is to me, it's more connecting to see the smiles of kids or the simple acts of goodness in the world. Because I think you could ask anyone from Bismarck or something that what is the golden rule, in Christianity? And we'd say all those same things. It's to be good to people. It's to be good, to do what's right, and these kinds of things. And every religion has some capacity of that. So you can connect to that anywhere in the world. But it's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot. You are an interesting person, Brayden. So I want to keep going, but I want to take a little break so we have enough time to take a little pause, and then we'll be back to ask the question. Do we need music to survive? Is that something we need, or is that just sort of a superfluous thing? So we'll be right back with more Matters of Soul Importance after this pause.
When you can't make it to City Hall or the school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
Well, we're back with more Matters of Soul Importance, and we have Brayden Drevlo. Is that how to say that?
Yep, Drevlo, yep.
The third of 11 children, right? Or 12? What is it?
11 kids.
11.
Yeah, I know, not quite.
Okay.
But we get a baker's dozen, with mom and dad. So.
Right, exactly. That's perfect. We don't hear a lot about large families anymore. I have 5 kids. It seems pretty
even
paltry.
5 is, seems big nowadays.
Right. And people are like, are all those yours? Like, do they all come from the same?
It's interesting that it's not just an American thing that people ask it. People ask all over the world, especially in Ireland. They're so curious. But I will say my parents, the advice directly from parents of 11 kids is that they say, anything over 3, it feels the same.
Yes.
Because mom has a kid, dad has a kid, and then the other kid. I don't know.
I was just talking to someone. Yes, I was just talking to someone about that. The third was, okay, my hands are full and I don't have an extra hand. That was that. The fourth one was a little bit hard. I don't know. I was a little bit overwhelmed, but he was such an easy kid. He was my easy to raise. And then after that, it's like, I mean, I could have gone on, but by then I was getting older. So,
and in our family, it's all, of course, you ask any parent and you say, did you plan on having 5 kids? And it'd say, well, it was a magical accident, like it just, things were meant to be. My parents say the same thing. They did not plan on having 11 kids. That's kind of scary. I get that. They had just started with the first 2. And I think they had realized that they really enjoyed the I could say the art or the act of raising kids, that my parents found a lot of enjoyment out of giving these kids these foundations and letting them kind of build whatever they wanted to do in life. So pushing all these kids to do their best at whatever it is that they want to, whatever they want to try. And so in my family, there's no twins, no adoptions. It's all like a year and a half. I feel so bad for my mom. God bless her, really, that I think,
you nurse the baby and then you're pregnant again.
I mean, I have to think about the number. She's been, raising kids or pregnant for what
giving
percentage
her,
of her life,
she's sacrificing her body and everything,
her soul, her
to bring
time,
people. But you know what? I'm just telling you, it is a beautiful thing to bring new souls into the world, and they go and scatter. And look at you, you're scattering literally all over the world.
Exactly. And I think any parent will look at that, and they're very proud of what their, I could say their blood, what their generation, what their, how they're spreading the things that you taught them. And my parents taught me in, small town Thief River Falls, that you should always be good to people. You should always pass kindness. If you're walking down the street and you see a piece of garbage, you should pick it up, even if no one's watching you, because it's just the right thing to do. And so it's nice to go around the world and just kind of live that personality that, I'd imagine if I took you to Ethiopia, you'd be walking down the street and just smiling at everybody, because that's just what we do, and then I do the same thing. If I take you to Belarus, you'd be smiling at everybody and they'd look at you like, what is she so happy about, but I don't know, it's just our personality, and I think your mom would be very proud of you as well, that you're going to Belarus and you're making people smile,
Absolutely. Spread that love. But you talked before the break about those connections and then how that's connected to your spirituality. And absolutely, I think God He is a relationship, and He made us for relationship. He is love, and love is something that it's not just one-sided, like it's reciprocal, and there's life in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so connecting with other people is a part of living.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's why COVID was difficult, because we were cut off from that, and we were really challenged by that. But I want to hear some of the highlights of you going out into the world and connecting with other people, and also just God bless your parents, because it must be so fun for them to hear about your adventures.
Yeah, I realize that now more and more that I have to be very careful what I tell my mom, because I only
You've been to some dangerous situations.
A lot of dangerous places. Yeah, lots of war zones. And I mean, yes, when people ask, what is it like to travel so much? It's an interesting question, because I asked them, okay, have you been somewhere? Oh yeah, I've been to Paris, I've been to London, and it's nice to go on vacations. When you start to travel a lot, the question is that, like, okay, so if you go to Serbia, let's pick, that you look up what to do in Serbia, and it says, go to this museum, go to this waterfall, and go to this park. Okay, nice. And then next week, then you go to Montenegro, same thing, go to this waterfall, this park, this whatever, so-and-so. And I found that what I really enjoy about traveling now, after 5-6 years, after going to over half the countries on the planet, is that I like to gear my travels to places where the pages of history are turning. Traveling to a lot of these countries, you get to experience a lot of really funny things, and but also you get to have the opportunity to see the pages of history turning. And so for me, it's been very interesting to be in war zones or disaster zones, or to see people in most critical times or the most interesting times, or to go to a country right after a new election, or right after God bless the Pope, but if he passes away next week, it would be very interesting to be, in Rome at that time, because it's a really interesting page of history to experience that. And so I feel like I've gotten a really interesting luxury in life to experience so many of those pages, and a lot of, for example, as well, when people think about war zones in the world, a lot of people, we think of just 2, and I don't even have to name them because we both know exactly which 2. It would surprise a lot of people to know that there's 64 or 65 armed conflicts in the world right now, and so to me, it's interesting to go understand what's happening in those places, and to spread that information, to then come back home to North Dakota and tell people, well, I know that Mali sounds like some country off in like whatever Tomorrowland, but there's some really interesting things happening there right now. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's interesting things happening, and there are things that are shaping the world.
It's interesting because when I'm thinking about what you're saying just now, it's almost like more like a journalist's heart. Like you want to tell the stories. You want to. I'm not that kind of journalist. Like I would be a little bit chicken at this point in my life, but I have kids, and that changed everything. I got more scared. I used to be very adventurous and would do anything, but once kids happened, But it's like a lot of people, I think, would like turn away from war zones, where you're like, no, I want to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things happening, and the history is really getting directed somewhere. I think also somewhere in my core, it's the idea that I'm also an EMT. I figured to get the certification just for fun, good life skill. But it's that same idea that the EMT or the firefighter or the police officer will run into that kind of problem because they kind of understand what it's like. And for me as well, then I don't have any qualms running into I mean, I'm not stupid, but running into a war zone thoughtfully. That I've seen a lot of war zones. I understand how to act in them, how to how to be safe. But also there's a lot of interesting stories that need to be told. And I also found that music also has its connection there. You might be sitting there thinking, okay, Brayden, what is he talking about? Music and war zones. Like, those two things are apples and eggs. But music is another variation of our question, that is music necessary for survival? Okay, let's think of the kid that's in a war zone. Let's pick Ukraine. The kid that his village is decimated, and maybe he doesn't even know where his parents are, and he's in some refugee center, and the kid can play piano. And so how do you escape from all of this trauma that's circling in your head? You just sit down and you play music by Mozart, because you remember a different feeling, or it makes you feel something different. So then our question is asked, is music necessary for survival for this kid? What would happen if you took that away from him? And so I found that I can also be proactive in this question, that as someone that knows how to fix pianos, that then I go into war zones or disaster zones and go fix these pianos, because it's an outlet for people to live. It's an outlet for them to express things that they can't say. Our whole conversation today is talking about how music and the soul are inherently connected. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I say to you guys that exactly what I'm going to say. Music, says things that, but music can speak for when words can't speak. Okay, it's nice when people say that, but to see it in reality, it's a completely different thing. That I feel that as a performer, for instance, this month I'm playing with 2 symphonies in the area, and I was just lamenting to my friends about this last week, that I get exhausted from a concert, because my job is, how do I share emotions with people? When I'm performing, how do I make someone feel torment? How do I make someone feel like, that first swirl of love? How do I make someone feel, it sounds horrible, but like, as a musician, maybe there's a part of the music that's just so demented and just so crazy. And like, how do I make someone feel like their horse was just lit on fire? And it sounds like there's no words that could describe that feeling. Yeah. But, somehow music, it is possible to express almost every emotion across the board. And so not to jump to our big thesis of the day, but the idea that, is music necessary for survival? My flip side of that question would be, is love necessary for survival? I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, thinking about this question, I feel like I've mentioned it before, but I once journeyed for a while with an atheist. We tried to do a blog together. It was an interesting thing. And then it kind of fell apart at one point. But she didn't like music. And I was like, I've never heard of anyone that doesn't like music.
Yeah.
So, and another thought that came to mind, we were talking before we started today about a concert I went to, FM Symphony, and one of the featured composers was Ralph Vaughan Williams, and he had been in the war, in World War II, and picked up broken bodies and all this stuff. But it was interesting because the composer was mentioning before one of the pieces that the concert was about bliss and kind of just this happy feeling, right? But like, one of the darker pieces that he wrote was one of the more happy, blissful pieces he wrote during the war. Mm-hmm. And his darker things were later.
Exactly.
And he's like, it's kind of a flip thing. And I thought, no, but that kind of makes sense, right? Yeah, because kind of what you're saying, like, you need something to lift your spirit. We need hope.
Yeah, and sometimes even like in that worst possible moment, that's when the most beauty comes out. She was also asking me earlier, who was, my favorite composer? Who's the composer that inspired you most? I would have to point to even people like Beethoven in this capacity. Many people know Beethoven. Let me sing some of his songs. Or Moonlight Sonata, or he had lots of really wonderful pieces. But Beethoven, I don't know how many people know this, he went deaf halfway through his life. When the first half of his life, all of his music was so giddy and so happy and blah, 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 blah. Look how fast my fingers can move. And then something serious comes. And it's like, wow, things are different.
Do you know Ralph Vaughan Williams? I was reading about him, then I was researching him, and he also went deaf, and it was because of the war, because of all the loud noises. So,
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. But a lot of Beethoven's most famous works, like Ode to Joy, was written when he was completely deaf.
Yeah.
And some of this most ecstatic beauty can come out of such a reverse emotion. But again, if you think about that, let's pick Ode to Joy, for example. Imagine you're sitting in the concert hall, your eyes are closed, there's a big 80-piece orchestra, and there's a symphony or a choir of 200 people. That is the final moments of this wonderful symphony with all the opera voices singing this da 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 da. Beethoven is directing, and he can't hear a single thing. That how I think about that kind of scene, and like goosebumps are coming. Like that is like his soul has been released, and I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but
no, that's so beautiful. So I'm supposed to be related to Bach, I guess. My great grandma used to. I just had to go there.
That sounds brilliant. It sounds brilliant. I would never.
I'm sure we all are.
I would tell everybody that.
I know. And my great grandma was going to be a concert pianist, but she ended up getting married instead. So I wouldn't be here if not. She was in Chicago. So we really do have music in our family. My grandpa could sit. They had a grand, and he would play by ear. It was just amazing. His mom was the one that was going to be the concert pianist. But anyway, music is fascinating. I can't imagine life without it. What were some of the highlights of like connecting with people? Like, tell us some of those, because you have some videos out there on YouTube, which people can go and watch kind of what you do in these countries. What were some of the moments that you just love sharing with people that,
I think a really funny thing to explain is as an American pianist playing concerts in other countries. Okay, so if I want to do a concert in Nepal, that there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of other pianists that they could hear from. So if the king of Nepal, let's say, wants to, there's not really a king. I don't think it's the prime minister, but if the prime minister really wants to hear a Beethoven sonata, they could have a German pianist come and do it, and he'd probably do it really well. I mean, if he really wants to hear Ravel or Debussy, he could have a French pianist come in. And so me as an American pianist, I mean, why should I go there and try to step on their toes? I feel like as an American, our specialty is stuff like Gershwin and Scott Joplin. And, it sounds really funny then when I explain this to people that some of those funniest and most interesting concert experiences, for example, I was doing a concert in Yakutsk, Siberia, where it's minus 52 on a warm day. And here I was doing a concert for about, 100 or 200 school kids. And what do I play for them? Nothing more than The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. Da, 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 da. And all these kids are going wild because they don't get to hear that. Normally they get exposed to Rachmaninoff and Prokofiev and Tchaikovsky. And
that's got to be fascinating to go into this whole other world and bring your world or another world that you connect to into this other world through music and through yourself. How
will it make these kids feel? I mean, think back to, many people know that song, for example, but how does it make you feel when you listen to The Entertainer? Ba, 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 ba. I don't know. It's kind of like,
I just have a memory of visiting my cousins in Florida one year, and my cousin Megan was playing it on the piano.
Yeah, you get such a big smile.
And I had a broken ankle, but it made me happy to hear that.
And I bet even she had a broken ankle, but her foot was tapping. And that's how these kids will respond as well. And so it's kind of sharing not only our culture, but it's sharing a feeling with them. Sharing that American joy, that crazy optimism that we have, even in the coldest inhabited place on the planet. You were asking earlier about some interesting travels. That's one that always sticks out to me. Going to the coldest inhabited place on the planet in Siberia. It was a messed up journey to get out there. I tell you, I had to learn Russian for this journey. It was so bad. And
wow.
But I wanted to go figure out what life is like in the coldest inhabited place. As North Dakotans.
It's not much colder than Thief River Falls, right?
That's what I thought. When I was growing up, I think the coldest I ever felt was minus 45 or so. And so then in Oymyakon, Siberia, it took about 5 days of driving through the wilderness to get out there. That out there it's minus 76. And how do people live in that in that world. I found out by the way, minus 76 is much worse than minus 45. I never realized that. It's colder than the planet Mars. So you dress up like a spaceman, you get frostbite in 90 seconds.
Wow.
But
it is worse, people. It is worse.
There are worse places to
live.
Also, okay, to all of you Minnesotans out there, especially anyone that's listening from the farms, from the countryside, that even we are lucky enough to have indoor plumbing here, even in this extreme cold. I never knew this, Minnesota, we are right on that brink of the temperature depth to have indoor plumbing. Because I found in Siberia, minus 50 is the cutoff for having indoor plumbing. At that point, they have water heaters above the toilet, and they use boiling hot water to flush it down the pipes. Anything colder than that, minus 60, minus 70, the pipes would explode. And so anything below minus 50, they have to use the outhouse. And so that was the fun of going to Omyokon, that there's no more indoor plumbing, that you dress up like a literal astronaut to go use the outhouse. And one of these funny things that I'll never forget about visiting is that, in Minnesota, when it's minus 30, that we like to get our boiling hot water and we go outside and we throw it up and like, woo, it turns to snow.
Yep, done it, been there.
I never realized this, but the exact same thing happens in minus 75 when you go to the outhouse, that I've never experienced that before, where you're watching it turn to snow on the way to ground. And, but like all of these small things. But I went out there to go play a concert because would these people ever get to hear an outsider or another pianist playing? Or and that was also the reason of going to Yakutsk, to go fix some of these pianos, because no piano tuner in their right mind is going out, to this place. But inevitably, music still exists out there. Music exists everywhere around the world. And I want you guys as the viewers to think about that, because that's my world, where I go to North India and you close your eyes and you hear the brilliance of an Indian and or you go to Libya, where you hear from the mosques, from the minarets, this beautiful call to prayer. That music exists everywhere and in different ways. Even in the United States, you might say it's stupid, but our laundry machine. But music, it has meaning for all of us in all these different, beautiful, beautiful ways. And yeah.
Well, our heart has a rhythm, right? And I grew up on a reservation in Northeast Montana, and that was one of the things about powwows and the drumming was just the heartbeat. It was just so powerful because it was mimicked after the heartbeat.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that means life, right?
Exactly.
So, wow, I feel like I could do another one with you. I hope we maybe can sometime, if I can track you down.
Yeah, right.
Where are you at now?
Yeah.
It's like, what was that? The guy that's always
Where's Waldo?
Where's Waldo?
Yeah. Where's Brayden? I think as I look forward to these upcoming weeks, I also, please correct me. It's Roxanne, right?
Yeah.
Because I always want to say Roseanne, but
that's what my husband calls me as a joke. So,
is it the police? Is it Toto? Which one is it? I don't know. But I was telling her before that I just got him back from West Africa, going completely by land there, and the land of Ebola and voodoo and corruption, and but now I'm back for a little bit here in the States. April 5th, I'll be doing a concert with the Symphony in Alexandria. A really wonderful piano concerto. It's like
this will drop April 4th. So if anyone,
April 4th, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, so then tomorrow, guys.
Yes.
That concerto is like, it's like if E.T. was written as a piano concerto. It's the most galactic piano concerto. I love it. But then as well, then I think this summer I might be having some concerts here. So I'll have to update you how things come along.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind interviewing you for a story for my faith conversations too, so maybe we can preview something coming up and do it that way.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone wants to find out more about you, I will include some things in the show notes so they can go check out your YouTubes, because those are some pretty sweet stories that you share. And it gives us even a little bit more of a glimpse of what you do. But this has been such a pleasure. Brayden, you are, wow, just keep going. It's so awesome
Thank you.
Have a young person out there like just sharing with such optimism your joy and everything. So,
hey, I'm just spreading that Midwest joy, So.
I'm coming to the party next year, and I'm gonna bring my kid and bring my youngest if he'll come.
It's gonna be a good time.
So hopefully you can meet him. But anyway, thank you so much again.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Enjoy your next concerts. All right, take care. Is music necessary for survival? If my conversations with Brayden didn't stir your heart, I'm not sure what might. Hopefully you've detected in our short time together what I have observed in this young soul who is driven by a desire to bring life to others through sharing his amazing talents, including those in war-torn situations where the simple act of resurrecting a broken-down piano could be the conduit for bringing hope and life to someone who had just about given up. I would highly encourage you to check out Brayden's videos on YouTube, where he marks some of his travels and the amazing things he has seen and done. Perhaps it will spark something in you, regardless of your age or season in life, to ask, how can I bring life to another this very day? It might be through music or something as simple as noticing a forlorn face and meeting it with a smile. We might not all be able to travel the world, but we can recognize the world right in front of us and begin there. Those regular listeners of this podcast likely have noticed by now that I tend to match the energy of my guest. Brayden was such an enjoyable guest and definitely brought out my optimistic spirit. I hope that our conversation leaves you with a little song in your head and a dose of hope in your heart. And by the way, if you're anywhere near the Alexandria, Minnesota area, he will be performing tomorrow night, April 5th, at the Power of the Orchestra event. That will be at the AAHS Performing Arts Center, and there's information on how to obtain tickets in the show notes. So make sure and circle back to that if you're anywhere near the area. With that, in a few weeks, I'll be back asking the question, what is mercy on Good Friday? As we inch towards celebrating the resurrection of Christ, I think you'll find the conversation with Monsignor Thomas Richter, who was named a messenger of mercy by Pope Francis, a gift. Until then, don't lose sight of the light.